At 10:14 p.m. on November 12, 1944, the air outside Metz, France didn't just feel cold, it felt like wetted stone. Inside the requisitioned cellar of the St. Pierre Church, Oberleutnant Klaus Schreiner of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division stood over a map table, bone dry and radiating a sense of absolute Prussian superiority. Above him, 3 meters of reinforced medieval masonry and a dozen MG-42 nests created an impenetrable shell. He poured a glass of schnapps, the amber liquid catching the light of a flickering lamp. To Schreiner, the Americans were nothing more than ghosts shivering in the tree line, a defeated rabble suppressed by the thousands of mortar rounds stacked neatly in the church's nave. In the next 40 seconds, Schreiner and his entire command would cease to exist. 400 yards away, Private First Class Silas Thorne was nothing more than a shadow in a drainage ditch. He was submerged in a slurry of icy sludge, rotted beet greens, and the metallic tang of spent brass. He wasn't holding a Garand. He wasn't clutching a radio to call in the big guns. He held a brass M8 Pyrotechnic Pistol, a tool designed to signal for a pickup, not to wage a war. What Thorne was about to do flipped Doctrine on its head. It was a maneuver so reckless, so unmilitary, that it was explicitly forbidden by the field manuals. But as Thorne stared at the church, he knew that the manual only taught you how to fight a war. It didn't teach you how to win one. Silas Thorne wasn't a product of the military-industrial complex. He was a product of the Gary, Indiana steel mills. Before the draft, Thorne was a skimmer at the open hearth furnaces. His life was governed by the anatomy of heat. For 12 hours a day, he watched how molten slag flowed, how pressurized gas pockets behaved in confined spaces, and how a single, well-placed spark could turn a controlled burn into a catastrophic failure. In the mills, you didn't need a sledgehammer to move a mountain of iron. You just needed to understand where the pressure wanted to go. When he enlisted, his instructors at Camp Toccoa were visibly confused. While other recruits were mastering the bayonet, Thorne was seen measuring the yield of local timber or calculating the wind drift of falling leaves during marches. They saw a quiet, unorthodox soldier who lacked the rigid discipline of a careerman. They missed the fact that Thorne wasn't looking at the battlefield as a map. He was looking at it as a plumbing problem. He didn't see the enemy. He saw a structural weakness waiting for a catalyst. The tactical reality was a nightmare. The Cathedral was a stone fortress that commanded every inch of the valley. To take it, the West Point strategist had ordered a textbook frontal assault. The results were written in the casualty lists. Corporal Leo Miller, 19, from a Kansas farm. He died screaming in the mud 3 days ago. A crumpled photo of his newborn daughter, whom he had never met, tucked into his helmet liner. Private Danny Russo, 21, a semi-pro ball player from Newark. He was nearly severed in half by an MG-42 burst while trying to lug a flamethrower across the kill zone. Sergeant Eli Vance, who had survived North Africa only to be pulverized by a direct mortar hit while following official flanking orders. Captain Sterling, the company commander, stood in a clean uniform in a rear bunker, clutching a clipboard. He refused to listen to Thorne's civilian suggestions. "We follow the doctrine, Thorne," Sterling barked, his voice devoid of the exhaustion that plagued his men. "We wait for armor support that is 40 miles away. You're a rifleman, not an engineer. Do not let me catch you tampering with signaling equipment again, or I'll have you up for a court-martial." Thorne didn't wait for the armor. He spent the next 4 hours in a state of intense reconnaissance, observing the church through a pair of crocked binoculars. He noticed a tiny flaw that the professionals had ignored: the church's coal chute. Every 60 minutes, the German guards opened a small iron grate at the base of the foundation to vent the fumes from the coal heaters. The heaters were kept on full blast to prevent the damp French air from ruining the thousands of kilos of gunpowder stored inside. Thorne realized that the air inside that cellar wasn't just air. It was a pressurized cocktail of coal dust and explosive vapors. He didn't need a 105mm shell to hit the wall. He needed a 2000-degree magnesium spark to enter that vent at the exact moment the pressure peaked. When he presented the spark theory to his platoon leader, he was threatened with a Section 8 for mental instability. Denied support, denied cover, and marked as a troublemaker, Thorne decided to go rogue. He stole 3 red signal flares from the supply tent and began his crawl into no man's land alone. The mud sucked at Thorne's boots like a living thing. He could smell the fermented corn from a nearby destroyed silo and the ozone of the coming storm. He reached his mark, a fallen oak tree exactly 400 yards from the church. He didn't aim the flare gun at the guards, he aimed it at the empty air. He calculated the geometry of war in his head. The wind was gusting at 9 miles per hour from the northwest. The coal chute was a narrow slit, barely 14 inches off the frozen ground. Technical precision. Elevation, 43 degrees downward arc. Lead, 2 feet to the left to account for the magnesium's wobble. Timing, 10:14 p.m., the vent opening. Thorne's thumb pulled back the hammer. The sound of the click was swallowed by the rain. He felt the anatomy of the shot in his marrow. He exhaled halfway, held, squeezed. The M8 kicked. A brilliant, defiant streak of crimson tore through the midnight sky. It didn't look like a weapon, it looked like a cry for help. The German sentries watched it, confused, thinking an American was surrendering or signaling a retreat. The flare didn't hit the stone, it didn't hit a soldier, it vanished cleanly into the dark maw of the coal chute. 2 seconds of agonizing silence followed. Then, the St. Pierre Church didn't just explode, it atomized. The coal dust ignited first, followed by the mortar shells, then the heavy munitions. A shockwave shattered every window for 3 miles. The invincible fortress was transformed into a pillar of white-hot magnesium fire. The immediate result was the total neutralization of the 17th SS hub. Without their Cathedral, the German line collapsed by morning. Thorne's single flare had saved an estimated 200 American lives and cleared the path to Metz. In the aftermath, Captain Sterling took credit for authorizing an improvised demolition strike, and the Army eventually adopted asymmetric ignition into their official doctrine. Silas Thorne's name appeared nowhere in the official records. He was given a Good Conduct Medal and told to keep his mouth shut about his unauthorized actions. When the war ended in 1945, Thorne didn't go to the victory parades in New York. He didn't write a memoir. He caught a bus back to Gary, Indiana, and walked into the same steel mill he had left 3 years prior. He went back to the furnaces, back to the civilian logic of heat and pressure. When asked what he did in the war, he'd simply shrug and say he was a rifleman who got lucky. He had cows to milk, he had steel to pour. The war was just another job done without the manual. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories.